Let's start off with some news before I jump into the Sofabaton X1S review. ELAC released their new debut 3.0 speaker series. This series, the 1 and 2, it's always been a budget-friendly favorite for a lot of people, especially the bookshelves. It looks like they carry over a number of upgrades over the 2.0 model, including a newly developed 1-inch aluminum dome tweeter and some new fiber woofers, as well as what they call improved internal bracing. I did watch some initial reviews, and there were some comments about these being pretty heavy, so it all adds up. Hopefully that is the case here. I think the look is interesting enough, and it appears to be priced competitively in the market. It was $329 for the 2.0 B5.2, and the new model looks like it's $349 for the new 3.0. These come in a variety of options, 7 different speakers in this lineup, so it might be a great option for home theater as well as 2-channel. Next, I want to touch on the Cambridge EVO 1, which I also happen to have in for review, and it should be coming in the next couple weeks. First of all, this thing looks really good. I love the walnut on the top and just the entire appearance. It's a piece that could look good under your TV utilizing the HDMI or in any other space where you might have constraints based on the design of the room or the space that's available. This thing is surprisingly heavy, and that's because it has 14 drivers with 700 watts flowing through it. Looking at the design of this one, it's going to be pretty interesting what types of tricks they can play with the imaging. The driver placement could possibly do some really interesting things here. Pair that with the Stream Magic platform that they include, and this one could be a lot of fun. I'm really looking forward to getting the testing, and I just got this one out of the box to start testing, so stay tuned for that review. It'll be coming shortly. So I previously reviewed the Sofabaton X1, and we sort of have the same thing going on here that we see in a lot of the budget amps that I review. An almost identical looking and functioning device with a new name. This one just happens to be called the X1S instead of the Pro, Plus, Mega, Ultra. I won't go into a deep dive on the functionality of the remote today, as I covered that pretty extensively on the initial review of the X1. But what I wanted to highlight today are some of the changes to the X1S and weigh in on my thoughts if the changes are enough of a value add to the original design. If you're new to this style of universal remotes, they go a bit further than simply controlling multiple devices. The obvious goal is to eliminate the number of remotes, but where these offer the most advantages are the more complicated setups, creating routines and macros. In the simplest sense, it could be something like, you just turn on movie mode and it turns on your TV, it turns on your receiver and maybe dims the lights. A more complicated task would be something like a movie mode that does all of the above I just mentioned, but in addition to that, it could have built-in macros. Possibly something like there's a certain setting that you need to enable, change, things like that. And rather than you pressing 25 buttons and navigating all the menus, it can all be built into a single click. First, let's jump right into the new updates. Looking at these two, you're not going to notice any difference here until you pick up the device. The new X1S model lights up when you pick it up, which is actually a huge plus and something that really should have been available on the original model. The original stays in a standby mode until a button is pressed. It's just so much easier and cleaner having it all come alive once you pick it up. The second thing you might notice after picking it up is the font no longer looks like an Apple II computer generated it. The original had a bit of a old green screen computer vibe style font. I'm sure a number of you out there still remember working on those. I only had them up till about middle school, but our computer lab was full of these. I can remember going in and playing Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego and the good old Oregon Trail. I think by the time I was in high school, everything was moved over to more of a modern operating system, but it's still kind of hard to believe that we were using computers like that in the not so distant past. Getting back to the font, the replacement and the update on the new model looks a lot more modern, and they are actually capable of fielding more text as well, so it is a good addition. They say they upgraded the hardware and software in the X1S over the original X1, and without knowing exactly what they did here, I can only go by what I've noticed so far. And it does seem like something was changed. I noticed a quicker operating remote, and it just seems in general more stable. Sometimes when you're dealing with these universal remotes and the programmed activities with multiple devices, things can go wrong. One device doesn't turn on in time and it can throw everything off, and then you have to get it all synced back up. And this did occasionally happen on the old model, and I had to just sync things back up, but then it worked again. But from what I've noticed so far on the X1S, these difficulties have been greatly lessened. So that's pretty good here, because if you have to use these in a household and there's a number of people using the remotes, If you're not the person who programmed this remote, you're probably also going to be not the person who knows how to fix it to get this corrected and working. So it's good that this is much more stable in this case. Now on to what I like before I go over some of the challenges and things I'd like to see on maybe a next model. If you ever lose or you can't find the X1 remote, you can simply use the app's Find My Remote feature, which activates a loud beeping sound for 30 seconds to help you locate it. If you have kids in the house, this is a great feature. Sometimes that remote just doesn't stay in the room with the TV. Sometimes it travels with the kids. It lives on somewhere else as a chair for Barbies, or thrown into the least obvious location possible. With this, you should be able to track that remote down from anywhere in your house. I can say the design of the remote is pretty good. It looks good and doesn't feel like something that was cheaply made. I've had a lot of remotes in from various products I look at and have in for review, and there's a huge range of remote qualities, and strangely, it doesn't seem to always follow the price. This style of remote in particular here is on about every product up to $300 these days, and they have gotten better, and some even include a mic for, voice control, things like that. More on that in a minute, Sofabaton. I think my favorite remote I've had in was from Buchard Audio. This thing is just solid as a rock and happens to share something with the Sofabaton. It lights up when you pick it up. End of the day, the Sofabaton remote looks the part, and I don't think you're gonna feel like it was cheaply made or anything like that. It looks pretty good. The battery life has been pretty good on the remote. It doesn't seem to eat up a charge too fast, but I also have a USB outlet on my chair here, so I tend not to let things get too low. And that's getting more common on furniture as well, so you likely will have something like this too. And this one even has a USB-C too, so we're starting to get all the connections we need for this type of thing. Based off what I've seen on the previous Model X1, you shouldn't have to worry about the charging very often on these. So far, the battery life has held up well and doesn't seem to be losing its ability to hold a good charge either. The app is for the most part user-friendly. I won't say it's simple, but at the very least, everything can be configured from your phone, rather than the older Harmony models that, we had to connect these directly to a PC. There are going to be some people who comment on how difficult it is to get everything connected, grouped, and configured into activities, but at the same time, I still find this updated system easier than what we used to have to do with the Harmony remotes. If you're not savvy, this type of thing is going to test your patience a bit, but just stick with it and you should be able to get everything going. I'm not really sure how else we would do this either. It's just kind of the nature of this whole thing. Combining devices like this, it just ends up being a bit complicated. I guess the only other reasonable thought here to simplify this setup would be if Sofabaton was able to get the hub to scan your Wi-Fi network and look for other devices. Then if devices were detected, it could just allow you to select which ones you want to download into your config. Maybe that's possible, maybe it's not. I'm really not sure. You can also control all of this from your phone rather than the remote if you prefer. And if you happen to have more than one of these, you can pick which hub you're connecting to from the app. So if something like the Sofabaton, one Sofabaton's in the living room and another's in the home theater, that kind of thing, that's a nice feature to have if your remote battery is dead, or you simply just don't want to get up from your chair. Since the hub is connected to your Wi-Fi, you still have all the controls. What I don't love on this one, I was really hoping for a touchscreen edition, but it's the exact same screen with a new font. The new font was appreciated and it does look good, but a touchscreen would really help with some of the usability. Instead, you have to navigate using this roller wheel, which works, but it isn't quite as simple as it could be. The button layout also remains the same here. The back button is kind of my top, primary objection. It's just a bit awkward in your hand when you're holding this. It's up in the top corner, and every time you want to use that back button, you kind of have to shift your hand. Having this located near the scroll wheel would have really made this easier to hold instead of, having to move your hand when you're using it. The off button on the top left, that one's fine to me. It's used less often, and it's sort of nice to have that one isolated from everything else around it. So, you don't turn off your whole system when in the middle of a movie instead of the volume control. The remote itself could also benefit from a mic for voice commands. You can integrate voice controls into existing platforms outside of this, but it would have been nice to have it contained in the unit as an option too. As this can be programmed with custom buttons, it would have been nice to have a few more available. You can add them into the screen, but the physical buttons are a bit limited, being there is no number pad. Maybe if some of the controls were rearranged, we might be able to fit a few more in here. All in all, I think the X1S likely is the buy to go after. It's certainly a no-brainer between the original X1 and this new model. It can control up to 60 devices and has a really large library available to help speed up the integration. I think it's likely your best option right now if you're moving on from the Harmony ecosystem. Check out my original X1 video if you want to see this one in action a bit more. I demonstrate more of the application during that video. If you haven't already yet, please give that subscription button a click. It helps me get in more gear for review and grow this awesome community. Take care and we'll talk soon. Later.